My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and I'm standing in the back row of my sister Emily's military promotion ceremony. Everyone here knows Emily as the star of our family, the successful military officer who made our parents proud. What they don't know is that the woman they've been calling a failure for the past 15 years is actually a general. Today, Emily is being promoted to major, and our whole family is here celebrating. Mom, Dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everyone who spent years telling me I should be more like Emily, everyone who said I wasted my potential, who asked why I couldn't follow a normal career path like my sister. But in about 10 minutes, Emily's commanding officer is going to see me in this crowd, and everything my family believes about me is going to shatter. Because when Colonel Martinez recognizes me, he's going to stand at attention and say the words that will change everything. Ma'am, you're the general? Before I tell you how my family's world turned upside down, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of sweet vindication. But first, you need to understand how I got here. How the family disappointment became one of the youngest generals in U.S. military history, operating in complete secrecy for over a decade. Growing up in the Rodriguez family meant living under the shadow of military excellence. My father, Colonel James Rodriguez, served 3 tours in Iraq. My mother, Lieutenant Colonel Maria Rodriguez, was a decorated intelligence officer. Military service wasn't just expected in our family, it was the only path to respect. Emily, my younger sister by 3 years, embraced this from day one. She was everything my parents wanted: disciplined, conventional, eager to please. At 16, she was already talking about West Point. At 18, she got her appointment and never looked back. Me? I was different. I questioned everything. In high school, while Emily was perfecting her military bearing, I was getting detention for arguing with teachers about foreign policy. When the school counselor asked about my college plans, I said I wanted to study international relations and Middle Eastern politics. My parents looked embarrassed. "Sarah," my father said during one family dinner, "you need to focus. Emily knows exactly where she's going. You're just wandering. Maybe I don't want to follow the same path as everyone else," I replied. "That's your problem," my mother interjected. "You think you're special, that rules don't apply to you. Emily understands discipline. She understands service." The comparisons never stopped. Emily's graduation from West Point was treated like a national holiday in our house. My acceptance to Georgetown for international relations got a half-hearted, "That's nice, dear," and immediate questions about whether I was finally going to get serious about my future. During family gatherings, relatives would always ask, "How's Emily doing in the military?" followed by an awkward pause and "what is Sarah up to these days?" The tone made it clear they expected disappointment. By the time I was 21, I had become the family cautionary tale. Emily was the success story, the one who followed the proper path. I was the warning about what happens when you refuse to conform to family expectations. What none of them knew was that during my junior year at Georgetown, I had been quietly recruited by a very different kind of military program. Professor Williams taught my Advanced Strategic Studies seminar. He was unassuming, soft-spoken, the kind of academic who seemed more comfortable with books than people. What I didn't know was that he was also a retired CIA operative who specialized in identifying exceptional strategic minds. During my final exam, I had written a detailed analysis of unconventional warfare tactics in asymmetric conflicts. Most students focused on historical examples. I proposed new theoretical frameworks for combating non-state actors in urban environments. 3 weeks later, Professor Williams asked me to stay after class. "Sarah, have you ever considered that your unconventional thinking might be exactly what the military needs?" "The military doesn't want unconventional thinking, Professor. They want soldiers who follow orders." He smiled. "Not all parts of the military." That conversation led to another meeting, this time with people who didn't introduce themselves with names, only titles. They asked me questions that went far beyond anything I'd studied. Hypothetical scenarios involving international crises, resource allocation problems, ethical dilemmas in warfare. "Miss Rodriguez," one of them finally said, "how would you feel about serving your country in a way that very few people could ever know about?" They were recruiting for a classified program that developed strategic analysts for sensitive operations. The work would be invisible, the recognition non-existent, but the impact would be profound. "Your family has a strong military tradition," another interviewer noted, "but they see military service in traditional terms. What we're offering you is different. Are you prepared for your family to continue seeing you as unsuccessful?" "They already see me that way," I said. "At least this way, I'll know the truth." 6 months later, I graduated Georgetown summa cum laude and quietly disappeared into a world that officially didn't exist. For the first 5 years, my family had no idea what I actually did for work. When they asked, I gave vague answers: consulting, research, government contract work. They assumed I was a low-level bureaucrat pushing papers in some forgotten federal office. Emily, meanwhile, was rising through conventional military ranks, earning commendations, getting promoted on schedule. Every family gathering became an Emily highlight reel, her latest training exercise, her exemplary performance reviews, her bright future as a career officer. Emily made captain, my mother would announce proudly. Sarah is still doing her consulting thing. What they didn't know was that I was developing counterterrorism strategies being implemented across 3 different theaters of operation. By 25, I was briefing senators on emerging threats. By 28, foreign governments were specifically requesting my analysis of regional conflicts. The work was intense and isolating. I spent months embedded with special operations units, not as a soldier, but as the strategist planning their missions. I developed psychological profiles of enemy leaders, predicted insurgent movements, designed approaches for winning hearts and minds in hostile territories. My team saved lives through careful intelligence analysis and strategic planning. We prevented attacks, disrupted funding networks, identified key targets for elimination or capture, but none of it could ever be acknowledged publicly. The hardest part wasn't the secrecy, it was watching my family's disappointment grow. At Emily's captain promotion ceremony, my aunt cornered me with concerned questions. "Sarah, honey, when are you going to settle down? Get a real job? Emily's building something substantial. You're just drifting." If only she knew that the drifting consultant had just spent 3 months developing the strategic framework for a multi-agency operation that dismantled a major arms trafficking network. But the secrecy wasn't just about work. As my responsibilities grew, so did my security clearance and the restrictions on my life. I couldn't date freely, couldn't travel without approval, couldn't even live where I wanted without considering operational security. My personal relationships suffered. I had to end a serious relationship because my boyfriend couldn't understand why I disappeared for weeks without explanation. My college friends stopped inviting me to gatherings because I was always busy with work or had to cancel at the last minute. The loneliness was crushing, but it was the price of the work I believed in. At 30, I received the promotion that changed everything. In a private ceremony attended by only the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership, I was promoted to Brigadier General, the youngest person to achieve that rank in my particular division. The ceremony was surreal. Defense Secretary Thompson personally pinned on my stars, calling me one of the most brilliant strategic minds of her generation. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were in attendance. Foreign intelligence allies sent representatives to acknowledge my promotion. But afterward, I went home to my empty apartment and called my parents to tell them I'd gotten another promotion at work. "That's nice, dear," my mother said absently. "Emily just got selected for a special training program. She might make major ahead of schedule." I hung up the phone and stared at my new stars, wondering if this was what success was supposed to feel like. The responsibilities that came with my new rank were enormous. I was now overseeing strategic operations across multiple regions, coordinating with international partners, briefing the President's National Security Council on emerging threats. But with each new level of responsibility came deeper isolation from my family. The gap between who they thought I was and who I actually was had become an unbridgeable chasm. During Emily's birthday last year, she pulled me aside for a sister-to-sister conversation. "Sarah, I'm worried about you," she said with genuine concern. "You're 31 and you don't seem to have any direction. I mean, I'm happy you have a job, but don't you want more? Don't you want to build something meaningful with your life?" I almost laughed at the irony. At that very moment, I was in the middle of coordinating a joint operation with British and Australian intelligence that would neutralize a terrorist cell planning attacks on 3 continents. "I'm happy with my choices, Em," I said carefully. "But are you proud of what you're doing? When you look in the mirror, do you feel like you're making a difference?" The question hit harder than it should have. Yes, I was proud. Yes, I was making a difference. A bigger difference than she could imagine. But I couldn't share that pride with anyone who mattered to me. That night, I made a decision. Emily was being promoted to major in 6 months. The ceremony would be public, with all of our family and friends in attendance. For the first time in my career, I was going to attend a family military event as myself, as General Sarah Rodriguez. I had received permission from my superiors to reveal my identity in limited circumstances if operational security wasn't compromised. Emily's promotion ceremony, held on a U.S. military base with extensive security protocols, qualified. It was time for my family to learn who I really was. The morning of Emily's promotion ceremony, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my dress uniform for the first time in years. The blue fabric was pristine, the brass buttons gleaming, and on my shoulders were the silver stars that had defined my life for the past 2 years. I had agonized over this decision for weeks. Revealing my identity would change everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. The shock, the questions, the realization that they had completely misjudged me for over a decade. But I was tired of being invisible to the people who should have known me best. I arrived at Fort Carson early, before any of the family members were expected. I needed to coordinate with Colonel Martinez, Emily's commanding officer, who would be conducting the ceremony. When I called his office the week before to explain the situation, there had been a long pause. "General Rodriguez," he had said carefully, "I've been following your career through classified briefings. Your strategic work in counterterrorism has been extraordinary. I had no idea you were Major Rodriguez's sister." "That was the point, Colonel. Will this compromise any ongoing operations? I've received clearance to reveal my identity in this specific context. My family needs to know." Now, standing in his office before the ceremony, Colonel Martinez looked genuinely nervous. "General, are you certain about this? Once this information is out there with your family?" "Colonel, I've spent my entire adult life protecting this country in ways my family can never know about. I think I can handle protecting my identity from my relatives." He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. This was unprecedented. A general revealing her classified identity at a family military ceremony. The ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours. At 13:30, I positioned myself in the back of the gathering area, far enough away that my family wouldn't immediately notice me, but close enough that I could observe everything. My parents arrived first, followed by my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and family friends. Everyone was dressed in their best civilian clothes, proudly carrying cameras and flowers for Emily. I watched my mother fuss with her purse, my father checking his watch, everyone buzzing with excitement about Emily's big moment. Emily herself looked stunning in her dress uniform, her posture perfect, her eyes bright with pride and anticipation. She had worked hard for this promotion, and she deserved every moment of recognition. But as I watched my family gather to celebrate her success, I felt the familiar ache of being the outsider, the disappointment, the one whose achievements couldn't be acknowledged. At 13:55, Colonel Martinez took his position. The ceremony was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Martinez announced, "we are gathered today to recognize the exemplary service and dedication of Captain Emily Rodriguez, who is being promoted to the rank of Major in the United States Army." The crowd applauded politely. I could see my parents beaming with pride, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Emily stepped forward as Colonel Martinez read her commendations. She had indeed been an excellent officer, dedicated, reliable, competent, everything my parents had always wanted in a military daughter. As the formal promotion began, Colonel Martinez pinned Emily's new rank insignia while reading the official orders. Emily's smile was radiant as she raised her right hand for the oath of office. "I, Emily Rodriguez, having been appointed an officer in the Army of the United States." I watched my family hang on every word, recording everything on their phones, whispering proudly to each other about their successful daughter. The ceremony concluded with handshakes and congratulations. Emily was officially Major Rodriguez, and our family couldn't have been happier. That's when Colonel Martinez did something unexpected. Instead of dismissing the gathering, he remained at the podium. "Before we conclude today's ceremony," he announced, "I have one additional recognition to make." The crowd grew quiet, confused. This wasn't part of the standard promotion protocol. Colonel Martinez's eyes found mine in the back of the crowd. "We are honored today to have a very distinguished officer present, one whose service to our country has been so classified that her own family has never been able to celebrate her extraordinary achievements." My heart started pounding. This wasn't exactly what we had discussed, but I could see where he was going. "General Rodriguez," he called out, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering, "would you please join us?" The confusion on my family's faces was immediate and profound. "General Rodriguez?" They looked around the crowd, searching for this mysterious general who shared our last name. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. As I moved through the crowd, people began to notice my uniform, the stars on my shoulders, the ribbons across my chest that indicated service they had never imagined. My mother saw me first. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. My father's expression went through multiple stages: confusion, recognition, shock, and something that might have been awe. Emily, still standing at attention from her promotion ceremony, followed Colonel Martinez's gaze to see her sister, her supposedly unsuccessful, directionless sister, walking toward them in a general's uniform. When I reached the front of the gathering, Colonel Martinez came to attention and saluted. "General Sarah Rodriguez," he announced to the stunned crowd, "one of the youngest generals in U.S. military history, whose strategic intelligence work has protected American interests across 3 continents." The silence was deafening. You could hear people's phones buzzing as they tried to process what they were witnessing. Emily broke protocol first. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're a general?" "I am," I said simply. My mother, still holding her tissue, looked like she might faint. My father, the retired colonel who had spent years disappointed in my lack of direction, was staring at my rank insignia as if he couldn't trust his eyes. "How long?" Emily asked. 2 years as a general, 15 years in classified service. The questions came all at once then. How was this possible? Why hadn't I told them? What did I actually do? How could they not have known? I raised my hand for quiet. "I know you have questions. I'll answer what I can, but understand that most of my work is classified and it will remain classified. What I can tell you is this: while you thought I was failing, I was serving. While you thought I lacked direction, I was protecting this country in ways you'll never know about. While you thought I wasn't living up to the family tradition, I was carrying it further than any of us ever imagined." Emily stepped forward and, forgetting military protocol entirely, hugged me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "We all are." As I looked at my family, really looked at them for the first time in years without the weight of their disappointment, I realized something profound. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had found my worth in service, in sacrifice, in work that mattered even if it couldn't be celebrated. But having their respect, finally having them see me for who I really was, that felt pretty good too. Today, my family knows they have 2 military success stories. Emily continues to excel in her conventional military career, and I continue my classified work. The difference is that now, when relatives ask about the Rodriguez sisters, my parents talk about both of us with pride. And sometimes, that's all the recognition a soldier really needs. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of hidden strength and ultimate vindication. Sometimes the biggest victories are the ones no one sees coming. Thank you for listening, and remember, just because someone doesn't understand your path doesn't mean you're not exactly where you need to be. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months after Emily's promotion ceremony, something unexpected happened that brought our family even closer together. I received a call from my commanding officer on a Tuesday evening. There had been a security breach in one of our allied nations, and they needed an immediate strategic assessment. The operation would require me to deploy within 48 hours to a location I couldn't disclose, for a duration I couldn't predict. For the first time in my career, I had a family that knew who I was and what I did. The question was, how do you say goodbye when you can't tell them where you're going or when you'll be back? I called Emily first. I need to deploy tomorrow. Emergency situation. How long will you be gone?" "I don't know. Could be weeks, could be months." There was a pause. Then she said something that surprised me. "Do you need backup?" I laughed despite the gravity of the situation. "Emily, you're a major. I'm coordinating with Joint Special Operations Command, but thank you for offering." "I'm serious, Sarah. I know I can't help with your level of operations, but if there's anything I can do from here, liaison work, family communications, administrative support, I'm here." It was the first time my sister had offered to support my career instead of competing with it. The next morning, as I was packing my gear, my parents arrived at my apartment unannounced. My mother was carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "We brought you something," she said quietly. Inside was a small silver compass that had belonged to my grandfather, the same grandfather who had served in World War II and whose stories had first sparked my interest in military strategy. "He carried this through 3 campaigns," my father said. "We always planned to give it to Emily when she made colonel, but we think he would have wanted you to have it." My mother's eyes were wet. "We're proud of you, Sarah. We don't understand everything you do, but we're proud, and we're scared," my father added with characteristic honesty. "We spent 15 years not knowing you were in danger. Now that we know, the worry is different, but the pride is stronger." The deployment lasted 6 weeks. It was a complex operation involving coordinating intelligence assets across 4 countries to track and neutralize a network that was planning synchronized attacks on civilian targets. I can't discuss the details, but I can say that our success prevented what would have been a devastating loss of innocent life. Throughout those 6 weeks, Emily sent me updates about family events I was missing. Not classified information, just normal family news that kept me connected to home in a way I'd never experienced before. "Mom made your favorite cookies and saved them in the freezer for when you get back," she wrote in one message. "Dad has been following international news obsessively, trying to guess where you might be. He made me promise to tell him the minute I hear from you." When I finally returned, my family was waiting at my apartment. They didn't ask questions about where I'd been or what I'd done. They just welcomed me home. "We have something to show you," Emily said, pulling out her phone. On the screen was a photo from a recent family gathering, the first family photo I'd been included in for over a decade. But instead of cropping me out later, they had left an empty space next to Emily with a handwritten note. saving a spot for Sarah. We took this at Cousin Maria's wedding last weekend, my mother explained. Everyone asked where you were. For the first time, we could say she's serving her country instead of making excuses.